Hi everybody, welcome to Jack Reading Corner. I am Jack, and I'm debating if I want to go to the Gibbons bookstore because it's really sunny out. It's still chilly, but it's sunny again. And if I don't do that, then I don't get out of the house that much except for to go for my 3 and 4 o'clock run, which is my exercise. Except for although now I've gotten to the habit of doing push-ups, getting up early in the morning, doing 4 sets of 10 push-ups. But and that's partly because our cruise will be in June, so I want to get my body a little more toned than it is. And plus, I think it's a good habit to, especially if, the weather's not great, and I don't always like going to the gym. It's just, and, it's a good, and sometimes my dad, the only time, because I don't drive, so I can't go to the gym, even if I did like going to the gym, then I can't go on a regular basis, because sometimes my dad doesn't want to go, and also he's getting older, and his shoulder's bothering him, so he can't go on a regular basis, and he's usually the one I go with, because my mom's not big on going to the gym either. So, I don't know. I mean, I want to get out of the house and go there, and also there is a little bit of exercise with going there because I get to walk. And although my mom is not going into work till later, so technically I could get a ride with her, but I probably would walk. I probably would still walk if I go. And I feel a little guilty going because then I know that the only way I can control myself from buying books there is if I just don't go at all. But the thing is, what's the point of going there unless you actually go into the store? But anyway, okay, so enough of me rambling. I'm here to review some books. So since I don't have a lot to say about the most recent books I read, I decided to combine the reviews for these books. And this is something I know that I can't think of who else does this, but the one person I know that I watch regularly that does this is Heather from Bookables. So I'm following her example and doing 2 books in 1 review. Okay, so the first book I finished not the very first, because the first book I finished this month, you've already saw that. So the second book, technically, that I finished this month is in a big, huge bind-up. That's why I'm showing, which is this. I didn't read this whole book this month, though. But this is a collection of all 7 of Jane Austen's novels, although the last one is actually a novella. And I've already read 3 of her books. Now, I have a weird relationship with Jane Austen because I have been very adamant that I don't like romance. Or at least I don't like romance that takes over the plot. But I have made exceptions, like either in 2018 or 2017, I can't remember, I read The Joining by Joanna Lindsey, because that was given to me. Our friends who I've mentioned, the doctor that reads to, he gave me, when they moved here, the same place where we moved to, he ended up giving me, he would sometimes, not just them, but other times he's allowed me to go through their collection of books, and I've been able to take some of their books home with me. And one of those books was The Joining by Joanna Lindsey. And the same thing with The Rosie Project. And it was one of these things where it'll be cute, quick, fun read. So I read both of those. I think I gave them both 3 stars. One of them, The Joining point was I didn't like the guy, the male love interest in that one. It kind of annoyed me. It was kind of a Taming of the Shrew retelling, although it was pretty close to the same time period. And then The Rosie Project was cute, and I appreciate that the main character had autism, or no, actually he didn't actually have autism, he had Asperger's, which is on the autism spectrum. It's more, I think, Asperger's, you're more highly functioning person, but you have a few quirks, and well, more than a few quirks, and you're a little different. And in fact, we actually for a while thought that I might have Asperger's, and I still am not 100% sure I don't. And we were basically, ever since then, I've kind of been curious and interested in books about that. But the issue with that is I don't like reading contemporary all that much. I mean, I'll read adult contemporary sometimes, but not young adult contemporary. But anyway, so I've made exceptions here or there. I mean, years ago, my friend Terry from Florida had got me to read her one of her favorite books, Fool's Paradise by Tori Phillips, which that was really good. I enjoyed that. That one was cute. I don't remember when I rated on Goodreads because I didn't add a rating on Goodreads. But I didn't do a review because it was so long ago and I don't remember. A lot of times what I do is, if it's a book I remember reading and I sort of remember how I felt about it, I will give it a star rating, despite my feelings on star ratings, my mixed feelings on them. But I won't necessarily do a review because I don't remember it well enough to do that. But I feel like with Jane Austen, I feel like she's kind of like the equivalent to Tolkien, where like she's one of those authors that you almost have to, they're like one of the original authors of that particular genre they write for, and you almost feel like you kind of have to at least try out her books. Just like people kind of are like, how could you love epic fantasy or high fantasy if you haven't read Tolkien? Which I've been very adamant about. That is so not fair, that people make you feel bad because you haven't read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, because it's not easy for everybody to read. And that does not mean you're dumb or you're not a huge fan of high fantasy. It just means it's a little more challenging for some people, and I feel like you shouldn't be judged for that. But I did, on my Amazon wishlist, I did put the audio, because a part of me still feels like I want to at least try to read it and finish it, because I have read The Hobbit. I enjoyed that one, but that was also written for kids originally, and but I've made several attempts reading the first 4 chapters of The Fellowship, and I just couldn't do it. So I figure maybe audiobook could potentially help, but that's not cheap, so it is asking a bit much as far as gift-wise. And I'm not made of money, so I can't, so it would have to be, But anyway, but the thing about with Jane Austen, though, her books are mostly not that hard to read. They are and they aren't. They're, the writing is a bit more challenging to read because it was written years ago and back in a different century. So it's still in English, obviously, but it's written a little differently, and plus there's a lot of words, which I was just thinking when I was practicing my review for this, I was just thinking how it's funny that I'm complaining about words, and one of my favorite Are You for the Dark episode, in case you don't know, it's a show where a bunch of kids tell scary stories in front of the fire at midnight, and you get to see the stories acted out on screen. And there's one episode called The Tale of the Bookish Babysitter with this kid who rather sit in front of the TV and eat junk food all day, and his mom, because she's working late, she hires a babysitter that's supposed to be really good to kind of watch him, despite that he's 12 years old, and he apparently doesn't need a babysitter. Although to be fair, that's when my parents started letting me stay home by myself. But anyway, he the magic, supernatural aspect of this woman, of this babysitter, is not only she's really good with kids, but she will use books to get the kids to behave and stuff, and change their naughty ways. And I don't mean that in a dirty way, by the way, so don't get your mind out of the gutter. But and the books, as they're reading them, the books will magically come to life, because it's Are You for the Dark, so it's gonna have a supernatural element. And when she makes a deal with him, and she's like, I'll let you read for a few minutes, and then, you read for a few minutes, and then I'll leave you alone. So he agrees, and he starts reading. He comes up with excuses to stop reading. And then at one point, when he's reading, when he stops the second time, he's like, you've only read one sentence. He's like, his excuse is, it's boring. First of all, at one point he says, I know boring, and it's boring. And then he says, there are too many words. So it's just kind of funny that I'm complaining about that when I was like, really, kid? But anyway, so I read the Jane Austen novel I read was Persuasion, because I've been working my way through her. I read Pride and Prejudice years ago in a different edition. I do feel like I almost feel obligated to reread it, but it's such a familiar story that it's like, I read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies too, so it's basically the same story, but with some added scenes and them fighting zombies. But Graham Greene just took the story and added this stuff to it. So it's basically the same plot. So I feel like I almost don't need to reread the story because I know the story so well. And then I've read Sense and Sensibility, and now I have read Persuasion. And Pride and Prejudice is still my favorite of her books. Not my favorite all-time book ever, and it's not even on my top 10 list, but it's still, at least compared to Jane Austen's books, it's my number 1. While Sensibility, as of right now, is number 2. So, Persuasion is about, and I'm not going to hold this book up because that's a heavy book. It has all of her novels in it. Persuasion is basically about the Elliot family, and our main, specifically Anne Elliot. And she is one of Jane Austen's oldest. She is the oldest heroine of a Jane Austen novel, and she's 27. She's 27 years old, unmarried, which is very funny because I'm 30, unmarried. I haven't had a boyfriend before. I've only had I came close a couple, at least once, as far as. But of course, this is the 1800s, so women were expected to marry. Even as late teenagers, they were expected to be married, or at least thinking about getting married. And it's just so funny. When I read her books, I have to remind myself, okay, this was written a long time ago. I'm a very modern woman. I live in a modern world where it's not a big deal if I don't get married by 18. So it's just I keep having to remind myself that. And so Anne and her father, and her younger sister, Elizabeth, but her older sister, or she might even be, I think Anne might be the oldest, I don't know, but her other sister, Mary, is married and has kids, and often pines her kids off on Anne, because she doesn't want to be a mom, apparently. But although, Terry made a point that she probably got forced to marry this guy. She might not even love him. And she might, or even if she did love him, she might not have wanted kids. But of course, back then, it was a big deal for you to have kids. It was like, if a woman doesn't want to have babies, doesn't want to have kids, then something's wrong with her. Even today, we still kind of have that whole, the older generation assumes that the younger generation, the millennial generation, that all of us millennial women want to have kids. I felt like when my grandma, was like, that we kind of talked about that one time, and I told her, no, I really genuinely don't want to have kids. Because first of all, I don't think I can take care of myself. And I just, and hopefully the guy I fall in love with doesn't want to have kids. But anyway, okay, let me get back to this. I keep getting off the topic with this, which, no surprise there. So, it turns out that the Elliot family is running low on money, and they are told that they cannot keep their home, and they might have to rent it out and leave their house. And of course, Anne's father, Sir Walter, is not too keen on the idea. But he knows that he has that much of a choice. And they rent it out to a family of sailor. They are recommended by Anne's godmother, Lady Russell, and some other friends that sailors might be good people to rent their home out to because, well, you know, if you know how a lot of Navy people are, they're very disciplined and neat and clean and tidy. In any military, they live very simple lifestyles. So he agrees to rent it out to the Crofts, Admiral Croft, who turns out, him and his wife turn out to be related to an old flame of Anne's, a guy that Frederick Wentworth, a guy that she was going to marry, but her godmother, Lady Russell, was like, no, you shouldn't marry this guy, he's not wealthy enough for you, he's beneath you, and it's one of the biggest, and Anne agrees to this, but it's one of the biggest decisions of her life that she's regretted. So it kind of affects her when she finds out that Wentworth is going to could potentially come back into her life. And, you know, there's a lot of near misses of them meeting. Like, they come close to meeting each other, but she ends up getting out of it. And it turns out that Wentworth, Frederick, is actually a captain now. He's doing better. He's doing a lot better in his life. He's more well off than ever. More well off than he was back then. And this whole time, it's basically Anne is dealing with her feelings, trying to get over the guy because she sees he's gotten over her, thinking he doesn't forgive her for what she did, and he's checking out other women that could potentially be wives. And there's also a couple other suitors that she meets. She meets another Captain Benwick, who, like her, is very passionate about reading, and they kind of bond over that, which, I gotta admit, that's kind of, I wouldn't mind hanging out with Captain Benwick, because we can talk about books, and, although he probably reads different kinds of books, since this is a different century than mine. And there's also a Mr. Elliot, who was a cousin that will be the heir to the Elliot family's fortune. Because, well, unfortunately, Sir Walter did not, he only had 3 daughters. So, unfortunately, back then, a woman could not inherit the family fortune, only a man could, which is the conflict, which actually is part of the conflict in Downton Abbey. Lord Grantham, Robert Grantham, he has 3 daughters like Sir Walter did, and Mary, the oldest, has to marry a distant male cousin that can inherit the family fortune. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the conflict particularly in season 1. So this book was, I'm sorry, but Jane Austen, I have a love-hate relationship. On the one hand, I feel smarter having read her book, some of her books, because, she has such beautiful prose, and they're so well written and stuff like that, but the problem with her books for me, is there's so much writing. Like I said earlier, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I am complaining that there's too many words. And nothing happens in her books, except for, characters talking and interacting and talking about their feelings, they're interacting with relatives and deciding who's a good suitor for them, and there's also the fact that, and occasionally something crazy might happen. Like in this book, one of the women that could potentially be a suitor, a suitor for Frederick, she gets hurt, and I was caught off guard when it happened. It was like, okay, what just happened here? All I know is they implied that everyone was freaking out and worrying about, I think it was Louisa was the one that got hurt. And everyone's like, oh my god, what do we do? How do we handle the situation? And she's like, they have to take care of her and stuff like that. And I just didn't realize, I don't even know what happened to her. Did she fall or something? Did she, I don't know. I totally missed it. I felt bad that I missed it, but all I know is on the one hand, there were all these characters just talking and walking, and then something happens to Louisa. It's like, okay, what just happened here? Now, of course, before anyone gets mad at me, if any of my viewers are Jane Austen fans, I don't mean any disrespect to Jane Austen. You know, and I know, yes, I'm aware that she basically, this is what she always writes, and it's what she knows, what she's familiar with. You know, and I think, you know, it's, she lived in the countryside of England. There wasn't a lot for someone like her to do as a woman, and also I know that I feel like she lives vicariously through her heroines, because she didn't really have a happy life. I mean, her family was poor and they had like a farm and stuff like that, but they weren't financially well off, and her father was just a minister or whatever, or vicar, or whatever it would be called. So I understand this. She's writing what she knows. A lot of writers are told that's what they should do. They should write what they know. So I don't fault the book for that. It's just not my kind of, it wasn't exciting. I'm a plot-driven reader, which, of course, I know people will probably say, why are you reading this book if you find them boring? But again, like I said, I almost feel obligated to read her stories, her novels. Plus, they're not that hard to get through, despite the fact that sometimes the language, even though it's in English, it's still a bit more challenging, because, like, you don't always understand what the characters are saying, because they do speak differently. Their English is very different from 21st century English. You know, if that makes any sense. And some people that read her books might be rolling their eyes at my criticisms, but it's how I feel, and I'm not changing my mind. But because there's 7 books, I have 5 more books to get through from her, or 4 more, possibly. 4 more, not 5 more, 4 more books, because there's Lady Susan, which is really, it's her novella, and it's just a bunch of, like, I think letters and conversations, which, by the way, the movie version of that one, Love and Friendship, was really funny. And I have to say, it's definitely easier for me to watch the on-screen versions of her books, because, you know, with the movie, they add more stuff, more action, and more, like, not a lot of action, but, like, there's, like, Sensibility, the miniseries version, there's a fight between Willoughby and Colonel Brandon, because he's defending Marianne's honor, because you find out that Willoughby is a scumbag that used Marianne, and I think he also used Colonel Brandon's sister. Yeah, I think that's what happened. I think her sister, his sister, or like one of his like niece or someone. But anyway, so like a lot of times people who write the on-screen versions, they add more stuff because her books might not necessarily be as exciting for everybody. Even the people that like this kind of literature, they might appreciate some more excitement and intrigue in the story than what is put into the story. And I have to say, and she does provide a very amusing commentary for the time period that she lived in, the world that she lived in. Now, my next criticism is that this book, you knew it was going to end happy. I knew that things were going to work out for Anne and Captain Wentworth. I knew they were going to get together, because it's like, all her books end happy. You know that they're going to end happy. So it's like, I want to be a little nervous. I don't want to be just exhausted. Like, that's what I said in the Goodreads. I feel like when I'm reading her books, I'm more exhausted by the constant back and forth and lack of communication, and the people talking and taking walks and all that stuff, and forming opinions, and the competition that the heroine has to deal with for the guy's heart and affections, and how all the outside people are telling them, oh, you two shouldn't be together, oh, you should check out this person, you should consider pursuing this guy over this guy, and it's exhausting. I want to be more anxious than exhausted. I want to be like chewing like this, or like, turning the pages, being like, okay, what happens next? I want to be excited to read her books, and I'm sorry, but it feels like a chore. And again, with all the complaining I am, then you're probably thinking, why are you continuing reading her books? Like I said, they're beautifully written, and I feel like, despite that some of her books are kind of long, they're very easy reads, mostly. Despite sometimes the language can be, not as simple compared to a lot of books today. But I feel like the whole predictability of the happy ending can be both good and bad. On the one hand, it can be, I think, if you're someone who reads because if it's a romance and if you're someone that does not like those tragic romances where it doesn't work out, if you're just tired of those or you have no interest in Jane Austen novels are good because you can always count on them to end happy. They're always gonna, the characters are always gonna get together in the end. Despite some obstacles, they're gonna be together by the end of the story. But at the same time, there's no, like I said, I feel exhausted because I just want to be like, okay, when are these two people gonna get together already? We know it's gonna happen, so when is it gonna happen? But other than that, besides, but they're also, it's kind of nice to meet a heroine in a Jane Austen novel that was closer to my age. I really appreciate it. She had my maturity level. Well, although that's debatable because sometimes I feel like I'm a little more immature than my age implies. But it was kind of nice, and I liked Frederick as a character. He was nice, but I feel like there wasn't a lot of development on his character. Like, I feel like we just knew that he was very prideful. We know he's romantic. I mean, there's that infamous letter that people always talk about that was really like, wow. He's a very sweet guy and very, but I feel like we don't know a lot. We know more about people like Darcy and like Colonel Brandon and Edward Ferrars than this guy, than Frederick Wentworth. I feel like I know more about those guys than I do about him. And although, even though I haven't seen the miniseries or any other movie versions of it, that's who I kept picturing. Because I've seen clips and stuff, and I think that's what Persuasion. I think that is Persuasion. And so I kept picturing that guy, the blonde. He's like blonde with short blonde hair. That's what I kept picturing as Captain Wentworth. But it's still, and what else can I say? He just, I don't like it. So surprisingly, I had a lot more to say, but it was more like I had a lot more criticism. I was more like talking about why I have such mixed feelings about Jane Austen's novels in general, and not specifically about that book. But I didn't have a lot to say about this particular one. It's like not a lot happened. I feel like it was basically, she runs into her old flame and trying to just, trying to get over him. But then, so not a lot happened. It's not my favorite of Jane Austen's novels so far. Like, at least in Pride and Prejudice, there was some animosity, and there was some, like, some tension between Darcy and Elizabeth. Like, it was very, very, like, entertaining, the back and forth between the two of them. So that's why that one's still my favorite. I think that's why everybody considers that one their favorite. But I can see where some people might consider Persuasion at least one of their favorites. There's some good things about it. Like I said, it was kind of nice to read about a heroine that wasn't a teenager. And I think you kind of feel bad for Anne. Like, she didn't mean to hurt Frederick. And she kind of gets manipulated a little bit throughout this, taken advantage of in the story. So, like I said, I don't have a lot to say about that one. So this video turned out longer than I expected it to be. But I think that's because I spent most of this part rambling about Jane Austen's novels and my mixed feelings on them. Okay, so let me get through this one quickly. So, the next one, okay, so if you watched my March mystery sale, they had a deal at, I talked about how they had a deal at Gibbons Bookstore where you could buy one mystery and get 3 for free. So, I ended up buying, I wanted to get some Stephen King books, that were considered mysteries. So I bought 2 of those. The other 2 that they had up there, because they had 2 more, I had already had them, and like I said in that other video, they weren't special or anything, so it was like no point in me buying them again, having another copy of them. So I saw some Charlaine Harris books. I liked her Suki Sekas books. I only read 3, but it was not because I didn't like him. It was more because, at the time I was thinking, I'm watching the show, so there's no point in reading the books. But, of course, the books do add some stuff to them, have some stuff in them. Hi, Rascal. Rascal just popped his head up. He's sitting in my chair as usual. So I, found out that she writes other types of books, like mystery books. So I decided to buy 2 of those. I think there were 3 or 4 of her books there that were mysteries. So, I picked the 2 that I thought were most interesting because I wanted to get the 2 Stephen King books, and you only get 3 for free. So, it's good. It wasn't my favorite book, but it was still good. I mean, and yes, I did give it 2 stars, like I did with Persuasion. But this is basically about this model from New York. She's also in her late 20s and is dropped by her agent because she's looking a little too old, apparently. And she decided, after talking to her childhood best friend, Mimi, back home in her old hometown in Tennessee, she decides to go back to Tennessee and stay and live with Mimi and use that opportunity to write a book and catch up with old friends and go back to college. And she figures out this will be good, just nice, relaxing, cozy, and warm, and just catch up with everybody. And she's thinking, this is what nothing bad could happen in Knowles, Tennessee. I mean, I've lived in New York, so but unfortunately she is proven wrong because as soon as she gets there, she finds out from Mimi that a college student was raped. And this turns into a big thing because, well, it is a big thing. But of course, in this town, they kind of, yes, it's heartbreaking and scary, but all they really do is just make sure to lock their doors and just be real. Women decide they need to be really careful. But then other women start getting assaulted, and some of the victims happen to be Mimi and Nikki. I forgot her name. The main character's name is Nikki. They're some friends of theirs, and then eventually it gets really bad because Nikki herself gets assaulted by the rapist. And this really affects her, traumatizes her. And she and one of the friends that gets attacked, they decide to work together and figure out who is the rapist. And it could be anybody. It could be anybody that they know, and that's what makes it even harder, because it could be someone that they considered a friend, that they couldn't even begin to imagine would be this kind of monster. And that's basically the mystery, is them trying to figure out who was the rapist, who is the monster in their town. And there's some subplots. There's there's also the subplot of Nikki used to have a bit of a crush on Mimi's brother, and there's that whole awkwardness of that situation. And then because of the assault on her, he ends up moving in with them. And there's Mimi is dating this guy, she's had some bad history with guys and has gotten divorced twice. And she is currently dating this guy, this lawyer named Charles, who's a bit controlling and aggressive, to the point, he's a little possessive of her. And, he ends up being one of those people on Nikki and the other woman's list for the possible rapist. So this was good. It deals with a very important issue of rape culture and how sometimes people, unfortunately, will dismiss it. And, Mimi's mom, even after it happens to Nikki, she's like, Nikki, they're gonna be all talking about you and gossiping about you, and you should, run home with the tail between your legs. Run home as they go back to New York where you're safe. And they realize that she's thinking, Nikki should go run away and hide, and that maybe she even asked to be raped. Which really pisses me off. I want to smack that woman. And it's also, it deals, and there's a little bit of racism because unfortunately in a lot of southern towns, still deep south towns, there's still some racism. Their way of thinking is not as, they're not as willing to be open-minded and understanding of people but Charlaine Ayers does a good job at showing, and I imagine, if I remember, that even in the Suki Stackhouse novels too, the quaintness and the niceness of small southern towns, but she also shows the darker side, the racism, the bigotry, the sexism in small southern towns, how it still goes on in today. Now, my only issue with this book is it is very dated. There's some cliche aspects, like, as much as I thought the whole romance between Nikki and the brother was really sweet, I feel like it still was kind of cliche and tropey. Like, of course, she had a history with the brother, which I think about. I want to write a book someday, and that's a novel myself, and I actually am using one of my ideas. I use that trope, and here I'm complaining about it in this book. So you definitely can. I feel like you kind of get the vibe of it being dated novel, and it was written in '84. It's not a literary masterpiece or anything, but still I feel like a lot of people that it is still an important read because it does deal with rape culture, and it's not done in a distasteful way. It's not very graphic with the rape and stuff. It's more about the emotions, the emotional reaction of the victim. That's the important thing, and that's what you get in the story, the emotional reaction of Nikki and the other victims, and how not just the victim, but everybody around, like how it terrifies Mimi and some of their other friends, and how concerned the brother is, and how protective he feels, and how some people just react really horribly about it, to the point where they just can't get past the fact that someone they were with was raped, and how sometimes how the victim it's like, if she's in a relationship, it might be a little hard for her to be in that relationship again, because she just keeps thinking about how this person attacked her sexually, and how it makes a woman very angry because this person assaulted her and hurt her, and that doesn't even begin to cover it, because, I don't know how it feels being raped, thank God, but I definitely can only imagine how traumatizing it is, and how some people, how some people just, make it seem like you need to calm down and not be so angry about this, and just forget about it. And it also deals with the mixed feelings that Nikki and the other woman have, that they almost do want to forget about this and move on with their lives, but they can't. And that it's unjust that this guy is still walking free. What else can I say about this book? And the ending was not a clean ending, I like that the ending was like, what, now that everything's somewhat okay for the characters, it's not all neat and clean, and it's not all neat and clean for them, things are never going to be the same. Like, sometimes authors, they just give you the happy ending, but in real life, endings are not happy, and when something like this happens to someone, I imagine people don't just get over it. Like, just because they may have stopped the bad guy does not mean they're just going to move on and everything is going to be all hunky-dory again. It's not. This will forever affect them, and they might never recover from it. So, and maybe someone might think I'm a little harsh with my rating, and I don't mean, when I give it 2 stars, it's not because, it's such a bad book and everything. It's just that I didn't enjoy, I think it's a good book. Just for me, it wasn't my all-time favorite book. I didn't love it, you know, but I think it's an important book to read. And, so don't hate me for giving it 2 stars. Let's see, what else can I say? It's a quick read, doesn't take that long. You know, it's only 14 chapters, it's just some of the chapters are long. Which I notice that authors do that. If books are not that long, like only a certain amount of chapters, like 10 chapters, 10, 20 chapters, then they will make the chapters, each individual chapter, some of them will be long, really long, so they can get everything to make it. I guess if it's a short amount of chapters, then they gotta make the chapters long, the individual chapters long. I guess it's a rule or something. But anyway, so those are my thoughts on A Secret Rage. It's a good book, I think. You know, yes, I gave it 2 stars, but I still think it's a good book. Still worth a read. Especially with the whole Me Too movement and everything. I don't think a lot of women would appreciate this kind of book, you know. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So those are the books I read, very different books. And I'm just... forgot. I messaged Terry and now she's finally messaging me back. Which, I hate it. It's not people messaging me. It's just the sound that my computer makes, and they make the ding sound, and it happens at very inconvenient times. Like, and it's, you know, I mean, I could tell people that, okay, I'm doing something right now. I'm filming, so I don't want to be interrupted. So really, I can't fairly get mad at people if the ding or my parents calling me downstairs interrupts me, and oh my god, she keeps doing it. Okay, I better shut up now because this video is getting really long, longer than I thought it was gonna be. So, those are my thoughts on those 2 books. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and click subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope as always you are enjoying your reading, and I will see you guys later. Alright, bye!